The wind howled through the frozen mountains, carrying the scent of pine and the distant cries of wolves. Snow fell in soft, cold flakes, drifting lazily down to cover the jagged rocks. Lyra stumbled through the mist, her body aching with every step. The weight in her arms and the burning pain in her chest reminded her that she was not alone. Another life clung to her. Fragile and desperate. Her own pack had turned away. They had said she carried a curse, that the child she bore would bring ruin upon them all. Fear and superstition had driven them to leave her at the edge of the cliffs, where the forest began to swallow the mountains in shadow. Lyra's heart felt like ice breaking under the weight of betrayal. She had trusted them, and they had abandoned her when she needed them most. Every breath she drew felt sharp in her chest. Every movement a battle against her weakening body. The snow was deep, and her bare feet were stained red with the cold's creeping bite. The howl of wolves echoed through the trees, a mournful chorus that made her shiver. For a moment she wondered if she would ever see another sunrise, but Lyra was not one to surrender easily. She pressed forward, leaning on the twisted roots of trees and the jagged stones beneath her hands. She whispered to her child, her voice trembling but determined, "Hold on. We will not fall here. We will survive." Her words were soft, almost lost in the storm, but they carried a weight of hope she had not felt in years. Time stretched endlessly, and the forest seemed to shift around her. Shadows danced like silent watchers, and ancient trees bent as if leaning closer to see. It was as though the world itself held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The cold was relentless, but so was Lyra. She refused to yield to the darkness. Just as her legs began to give way beneath her, a presence emerged from the mist. At first, it was only a shadow, tall and silent, moving with a grace that made the snow stir beneath its steps. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Her instincts screamed for caution, for retreat, but she could not move. Something about this figure commanded attention. A power that made her pulse quicken. A deep growl rolled through the air, low and resonant. Then the figure stepped into the moonlight. Lyra gasped. A large wolf, larger than any she had seen before, stood before her. Its fur was as black as midnight, its eyes glowing amber like molten fire. The wolf's gaze met hers, sharp and unyielding, and yet there was a strange understanding in it. And then she saw him. A man emerged from behind the wolf, tall and strong, his presence as commanding as the beast at his side. His hair was dark, falling in waves that caught the silver light of the moon. His eyes were sharp, golden in the shadows, and they seemed to see straight into her soul. Every fiber of her being recognized him not as a friend, not as a stranger, but as someone who belonged to the wilds in the same way she did. "Lyra," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying over the wind. It was not a voice that demanded obedience, yet it filled her with a strange sense of safety. "You should not be here. The mountain does not forgive weakness." I cannot." "Go back," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "They left me my pack. They left me to die." Her words trembled, but there was no anger, only exhaustion and fear. The man studied her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he moved closer. His steps were silent over the snow, deliberate and powerful. The wolf beside him watched, ears flicking, muscles tense, ready to strike at any threat. Lyra felt herself lifted, his hands strong and careful beneath her arms. Despite his rough exterior, his touch was gentle, as if he were handling something precious and fragile. "You will not die," he said again, more firmly this time. "Not while I breathe." His eyes held hers, unwavering and unflinching. There was a fire in him, a power that seemed to push back the cold and the darkness surrounding her. Lyra's heart raced. She did not know this man, yet something about him felt inevitable. She felt a pull toward him, a magnetic force she could neither resist nor understand. He carried her with ease, moving through the snow as if it were solid ground beneath his feet. The forest seemed to part for them, shadows twisting away, the wind softening. As they moved deeper into the forest, the air grew warmer, strange, and alive. The trees arched overhead like protective sentinels, and the snow began to thin, revealing paths worn long ago by creatures of the wild. Lyra felt the child in her stir, and she placed a trembling hand over her stomach. It was a small, fragile life, but it pulsed with determination, mirroring her own will to survive. "You are strong," the man said, almost to himself. "Stronger than they will ever know." Lyra blinked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "Why? Why are you helping me?" "You are my rival, my enemy." He paused, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "The world does not always care for rivalries," he said. "Sometimes it places the right people in the wrong place. For a reason." His gaze softened, just a fraction, and Lyra felt her breath catch. They reached a hidden hollow, a small sanctuary carved into the mountain. Smoke curled from a fire pit, and the walls were etched with strange, glowing symbols. Lyra had never seen anything like it. The air smelled of herbs and earth, warm and inviting after the cold outside. He laid her gently on a bed of furs. "Rest," he said. "You need strength for what is to come. The night is long, and the mountains do not forgive weakness easily." Lyra wanted to ask more, to demand answers, to understand why he had saved her. But her body rebelled, and sleep pulled her into its embrace. As she drifted, she felt the weight of the world ease slightly, carried away by the presence of this stranger and the protective wolf at his side. In her dreams, the forest spoke. Shadows whispered secrets, wind carried memories of battles long past, and snowflakes danced like tiny stars. She saw visions of her child, a small figure with eyes like fire, now walking among wolves that were bigger, fiercer, and yet loyal beyond measure. She saw herself not broken and abandoned, but strong and unyielding, standing beside the man who had saved her, and yet in the deepest corners of her mind, a warning lingered. A shadow, darker than night itself, watched from the edges of the trees. It was silent, patient, and waiting. The curse that had haunted her family, the fear that had driven her pack to abandon her, was not gone. It lingered, a silent threat, reminding her that survival was only the first step in a far greater journey. When Lyra awoke, the fire had burned low, and the wolf was curled at the edge of the furs, its eyes glowing softly in the dim light. The man was there, watching her, his expression unreadable but alert. "You have survived the night," he said. "That is the first test. There are more to come, and the forest, the world, will not wait for you to be ready." Lyra swallowed hard, fear and awe mingling in her chest. She was no longer alone, yet the journey ahead promised danger, mystery, and a force beyond her understanding. She could feel it in the air, in the firelight, and in the way the wolf's eyes never left her. The man rose, stepping back into the shadows of the hollow. "Rest now," he said softly. "Tomorrow, we move deeper into the forest. There are eyes watching us, and not all of them are kind."
Iris.
Heart pounded. She did not yet know his name, his intentions, or the full reason he had saved her. But she knew one thing with certainty: the night was only the beginning. And her life and the life of her child was no longer hers alone to command. Outside, the wind howled again, carrying a promise of trials, danger, and destiny. Lyra's hand rested over her stomach, the warmth of her child a fragile beacon in the cold. Somewhere in the forest, the shadows shifted, and unseen eyes followed their every move. The journey had begun. There was no turning back. The first light of dawn spilled over the snow-dusted peaks, turning the world into a quiet, silvered expanse. Lyra awoke to the soft rustle of the wolf at the edge of the firs, its amber eyes fixed upon her. The fire had long since died down, leaving only faint embers glowing like dying stars. The air smelled of frost and pine, crisp and sharp. She sat slowly, her body stiff from the night, and pressed her hand over her stomach. Her child stirred, a small movement that made her chest ache with both fear and love. She had survived the first night, but the journey ahead seemed impossible. Every instinct told her danger was near. And yet there was something in the forest, a quiet pulse of life that whispered that she was not yet finished. The man from the night before in though she did not yet know his name, merged from the shadows. He moved like a predator through the hollow, silent and purposeful, his eyes always alert. He carried a bundle of fresh herbs and water, placing them near her. "You must eat," he said softly, his voice a low melody over the quiet wind. "Strength is not just in the body. Your child needs it as much as you do." Lyra nodded, though words failed her. The intensity in his gaze was not commanding as before. Now there was a weight of concern beneath it. She felt her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with the strange, unspoken connection that had sparked the night before. The man who should have been her enemy had become her protector, and she could not yet understand why her heart accepted it. The wolf stretched and rose, its massive form casting a shadow over the hollow. Arain's hand rested briefly on its back, a gesture of respect and authority. The creature circled her once, sniffing the air, then settled beside the fire pit, as if taking watch. Lyra realized she was not merely a guest. She was under protection, in a place where the forest itself seemed to bend to the will of her rescuer. "You will need more than warmth to survive here," Orin said. "The mountains are alive. They remember everything: betrayals, sacrifices, old grudges. They will test you." Lyra's lips trembled. I have nowhere else to go. My pack, they have abandoned me. And yet you chose to save me? Why?" Arain's eyes softened slightly. "Because strength is not only measured in bloodlines or titles. You have something they do not see: resilience, courage, and a spark that cannot be broken. That is rare. That is dangerous. And that is why I must keep you safe." Lyra felt a shiver run through her, a mix of awe and fear. The mountains were silent now, but the warning in his words echoed in her mind. She'd always thought that survival was a matter of strength and cunning. Yet here in this hidden hollow with the man and the wolf, she understood that survival was also about trust, and she did not know if she could yet trust him completely. The morning passed in quiet lessons. Orin guided her through the hidden paths of the hollow, showing her where the herbs grew, where the water was purest, and which shadows to avoid. The forest was alive with subtle movements, small sounds, and faint glimmers of light that hinted at creatures she could barely imagine. Lyra watched him carefully. There was a rhythm to his actions, a certainty that made her feel both safe and exposed. His strength was undeniable, but it was not merely physical. There was a depth, a history etched into every line of his face, every movement he made. She sensed that he carried burdens of his own, secrets that were as dangerous as the mountains themselves. Hours passed, and the sun rose higher, melting some of the frost and revealing the forest in its full, eerie beauty. Lyra felt the weight of her exhaustion, the ache of her body, and the constant worry for the child she carried. Yet as she moved through the forest, following Arain's guidance, she also felt a growing clarity. The world beyond the hollow was harsh, but there was a pattern, a design, that perhaps she could navigate if only she found the courage to embrace it. As evening approached, a low mist began to creep along the forest floor. The shadows stretched and lengthened, and the howl of distant wolves rose again, more insistent this time. Arain's expression darkened. "They're coming," he said, his voice a low growl. "Not all who watch from the shadows mean well. Some remember the wrongs of the past, and some seek to finish what was started." Lyra's heart tightened. She had known danger would follow her, but hearing it aloud made it real. Who are they?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Those who fear what they cannot control," Orin replied. "Your pack. And others who believe that power must be taken, not earned." His eyes softened slightly as though he felt her fear. "Do not let them see you falter. You are stronger than you think." The first sign of movement came at twilight. Shadows twisted between the trees, silent and quick. Lyra's pulse quickened, and she instinctively stepped closer to Orin. He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and grounding. "Stay behind me," he said. "Trust me." Shadows resolved into figures: wolves, large and feral, their eyes glinting with hunger and cunning. They circled the hollow, their movements careful, testing. Lyra's breath caught, and for the first time, She truly understood the power of the man who had saved her. Orin did not flinch. His presence alone commanded the forest and the creatures within it. The wolves hesitated, ears flicking, muscles coiled, but they did not advance. "You have something they want," he said, voice low, "and they will not stop until they have it." Lyra pressed a hand to her chest, feeling both fear and the strange thrill of survival. She realized that the forest, the mountains, and even the wolves themselves were teaching her a harsh truth. Life was not given, it was claimed, and she would need every ounce of courage to claim hers. Night fell fully, and the hollow was cloaked in silver moonlight. Orin built a fire, the glow illuminating the runes etched into the stone walls. Lyra watched the flickering light, feeling both awe and unease. The power in the hollow was palpable, a living force that seemed to pulse with every beat of her heart. "You must rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow, we continue your lessons. You will need to know how to survive, how to move unseen, how to protect yourself and your child. The world outside is not forgiving." Lyra nodded, though her mind was restless. She wanted to ask questions, to understand the man who had saved her, the wolf who had guarded her, and the strange magic that seemed to flow through the hollow. Yet sleep claimed her before she could speak, wrapping her in a blanket of dreams filled with shadow and light. In her sleep, she saw visions. Wolves with eyes like fire ran through endless forests, and shadows stretched across mountains under a blood-red moon. She saw herself, smaller yet resolute, standing beside Orin, facing forces she could barely comprehend. The child in her womb moved, a tiny heartbeat echoing through the visions, a reminder of why she could not give in. When she awoke, the fire had burned low, and the wolf lay near her, its eyes following every movement. Orin was already awake, standing by the entrance of the hollow, looking out into the forest. "The shadows are restless," he said. "They know you are here. They sense what is coming." Lyra shivered. What will happen to us?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence a shield against the unseen threats outside. "Whatever comes," he said finally, "we face it together. You are not alone. You never will be." Her heart fluttered at his words. They were simple, yet carried a weight beyond measure. For the first time since being abandoned, she felt a flicker of hope, a fragile spark that perhaps she could survive this ordeal, and perhaps more than that. She could claim a life of her own choosing. As the wind whispered through the mountains, and the moon rose high above, Lyra knew one truth with certainty: the journey ahead would be perilous. The shadows long and cunning, and the forces arrayed against her powerful. But for the first time, she felt ready to meet them. With Orin at her side, and the wolf guarding her, she would not fall. Outside the hollow, the night deepened. Unseen eyes watched from the forest, patient and silent. Something was moving, waiting for the right moment, a force older than the mountains themselves. The first battle for survival had been won. The true test had only just begun, and in the quiet, Lyra whispered to the child within her, "Hold on. The world is cruel, but we are stronger. We will face it together." The forest around the hollow was quiet in the early morning, the kind of silence that carried weight, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Lyra woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through the branches, and for a moment, she felt a fragile sense of peace. The child within her stirred, tiny movements reminding her that she had survived so far, and that survival alone was not enough. Orin was already awake. Standing near the entrance of the hollow, he had a long cloak wrapped around him, his eyes scanning the forest with the sharp vigilance of a predator. The wolf sat quietly beside him, its amber eyes reflecting the morning light. Lyra watched them both, a mix of awe and gratitude filling her chest. They were her guardians, her shields, and for the first time, she did not feel completely alone in the world. "You must come with me," Orin said, his voice low but firm. "The forest is waking, and it is time you learned its paths." Lyra rose slowly, wincing as her body reminded her of the ordeal she had endured. She wrapped herself in a cloak Orin offered, the fabric thick and warm, and followed him into the forest. The snow had begun to melt slightly, leaving the earth damp and soft beneath their feet. Every sound seemed amplified: the crunch of snow, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of unseen creatures. As they walked, Oren spoke of the forest and its hidden rules. "The mountains and woods are alive," he explained. "They remember everything, every act of kindness, every betrayal. You cannot move blindly here. You must feel the life around you, understand it, and respect it." Aller listened, absorbing every word. She had always known fear and loss, but she had never truly understood the depth of the world beyond the mountains. Here, every shadow could be friend or foe. Every movement carried meaning, and the wind itself seemed to speak in warnings and guidance. They came to a narrow gorge, a natural bridge of stone spanning a rushing river below. Oren stopped and turned to her. "This is your first test," he said. "To survive here, you must learn to trust not only me, but yourself." Lyra's heart raced. The river roared below, white water clashing against rocks. The bridge was narrow, slick with ice, and one wrong step could mean disaster. She swallowed hard, fear and determination warring within her. "Take it slowly," Oren instructed, his golden eyes steady on hers. "One step at a time. Feel the stone beneath your feet. Let the rhythm of the river guide you." Lyra nodded and stepped onto the bridge. Each movement was deliberate, careful. The wind tugged at her cloak. The river's roar made her heart beat thunder in her ears, but she remembered his words. Slowly, cautiously, she moved forward. Halfway across, a branch snapped underfoot, sending a shiver through her body. She froze, staring down at the churning waters below, and for a moment doubt gripped her. "Do not look down," Rain's voice said, calm but commanding. "Look forward, feel the stone, trust yourself." She focused, each step becoming steadier. Her breath synchronized with the rhythm of her heart and the river below. Finally, she reached the other side, her legs trembling but unbroken. Oren was there, his hand reaching to steady her, his presence grounding her. "You did well," he said quietly, a faint hint of pride in his tone. "You have the strength to survive, Lyra. Never forget that." For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Lyra felt a warmth rise in her chest, a mixture of relief, admiration, and an unfamiliar longing. She did not yet understand it fully, but she knew the man before her was more than a protector. He was a force that could shape her destiny. The forest continued to teach them both as they moved deeper. They tracked prey, listened to the whispers of the wind, and learned the subtle signs of danger. Lyra began to notice patterns, small rhythms that allowed her to predict movements, sense threats before they arrived. Oren guided her with patience, correcting her when she faltered, praising her when she succeeded. Their interactions were careful dances of power and trust, a bond forming in silence and shared experience. As dusk approached, the first shadows of danger began to stretch across their path. Lyra noticed figures moving between the trees' wolves, larger than normal, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Rain's stance stiffened, his hand resting on the hilt of a short sword strapped to his side. "They have found us," he said, voice low and serious. "Not all who come from the shadows wish to speak. Some only wish to take what they cannot have." Lyra's pulse quickened. Fear pressed against her chest, but she remembered the lessons of the day. She stood tall, her hand resting protectively over her child, her gaze following Rain's as he studied the approaching figures. The wolves emerged fully from the shadows. Their forms massive, and yet they did not attack immediately. They circled, testing, gauging. Lyra felt the tension in the air, the sense that the forest itself held its breath. Oren stepped forward, his presence commanding. The wolf at his side growled low, a sound that echoed through the trees and caused the shadow wolves to pause. "They are yours to face," he murmured to Lyra, though his eyes never left the approaching pack. Lyra's heart pounded. She had never faced such creatures before, yet instinct and courage guided her. She took a step forward, her voice steady. "We will not run," she said, surprising herself with the strength in her words. The shadow wolves tilted their heads, their amber eyes flickering with curiosity and caution. Lyra's stance was firm, her gaze unflinching. And the child within her seemed to respond, tiny pulse of life strengthening her resolve. Orin watched her, a faint smile touching his lips. "You are learning," he said. "The forest has chosen you, and that is no small thing." The shadow wolves retreated, melting back into the trees as silently as they had appeared. Lyra exhaled, relief washing through her. She had survived the first real test of the forest, and more importantly, she had begun to understand the power she carried not just in her child, but in herself. That night they returned to the hollow. Lyra tended to the fire while Orin stood watch, his figure a dark silhouette against the moonlight. The wolf curled at her feet, its breathing steady and calm. "You have grown stronger today," Orin said quietly. "The forest tests everyone, but few rise to meet it as you have. You are not the same woman who wandered through the snow in the night. You are more than that. You are something the world will remember." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest, a strange mixture of pride and fear. She did not fully understand what she was becoming, but she felt the pull of destiny. And for the first time, she realized that Iran's presence was not simply protection, it was guidance, perhaps something deeper. Sleep came reluctantly that night, filled with visions. She dreamed of the mountains and forests, of shadows and light dancing together. She saw herself standing with Orin, facing creatures that had once seemed invincible. She saw her child growing, strong and radiant, a symbol of hope and change. But there was also darkness in the dreams, a lingering threat, a shadow that moved unseen, waiting for the moment to strike. Lyra awoke with a start, her hand instinctively over her child. The hollow was silent, but the unease remained. She understood now that the forest's trials were not over, that danger was always near. Orin noticed her unease and approached. "The shadows are patient," he said. "They wait for weakness. But you are learning to stand against them." Lyra met his gaze, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "I want to be ready," she said softly. "I will not fail." "You will not," he replied, his voice firm. "Not while I am here, and not while the forest has chosen you." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of trials to come. The night was long, but Lyra's heart held a spark that could not be extinguished. She was no longer merely surviving, she was becoming something stronger. Something capable of facing the shadows and claiming her place in the world and in the distance. Unseen eyes watched from the darkness, waiting for the right moment. The forest was alive, and the next challenge was coming. Lyra could feel it in the air, in the pulse of the wind, and in the steady presence of the man who had saved her. The journey was far from over, and the child within her stirred once more, a tiny heartbeat echoing in rhythm with her own. The trials ahead would test every ounce of courage, every shred of hope, but Lyra was ready to meet them. Together with Orin, she would face whatever the shadows had planned. And she would rise, not just as a survivor, but as a force the forest could not ignore. The wind carried the scent of snow and pine as the forest stirred beneath the pale light of dawn. Lyra stood at the edge of the hollow, the child in her arms wrapped in a soft blanket of furs. Her breath rose in clouds, and every beat of her heart seemed to echo through the silent trees. The shadows of the past weeks lingered at the edges of her mind, the abandonment by her pack, the cold nights of pain and fear, and the relentless trials of the forest. Yet here she was, alive and strong, her spirit tempered like steel in the fire of hardship. Orin emerged from the shadows, his cloak brushing against the snow-dusted ground. His golden eyes, sharp and commanding, softened for a fleeting moment as they met hers. The wolf at his side growled low, sensing the shift in the air. Danger was near yet. Lyra did not tremble. She had learned, and she had grown. "Today the forest tests us all," Orin said quietly. His voice carried a weight that demanded attention. "Those who seek to harm us are clever, patient, and relentless. But you are ready. Together, we will face them." Lyra nodded, her fingers tightening around the child. She felt a surge of determination, a pulse of energy she had never known before. The lessons of the mountains, the hidden paths, the whispers of the wind, they were all a part of her now. She could sense the life around her, feel the rhythm of the earth and the forest. Survival was no longer enough. She had become a force in her own right. The first sign of movement came at midday. From the distant trees, shadows began to gather, figures emerging with silent precision. Lyra recognized the shapes wolves, larger and fiercer than before, moving with calculated steps. She did not falter. Her pulse was steady, her breath even. Orin stepped forward, his presence both shield and beacon. "They are testing us," he said. "Not all will strike at once. They seek weakness, hesitation. Do not give it to them." Lyra tightened her grip on the child and stepped beside him. The wolf growled, muscles coiled, ready to strike. The forest seemed to hum with tension, every leaf and branch alive with anticipation. And then the shadow wolves came fully into view, circling around them, their amber eyes gleaming in the pale light. Arain's voice was calm but commanding. "Stand your ground. Show them we are not prey." Lyra took a deep breath and lifted her chin. Fear had once ruled her, but now it was tempered by courage and knowledge. She had faced the forest's trials. She had survived the cold and the shadows, and she had grown. Her eyes met Arain's, and in that silent exchange, they shared a bond stronger than any threat before them. The shadow wolves advanced cautiously, testing the boundaries. Lyra moved instinctively, every step deliberate, guided by the lessons Orin had taught her. She sensed the rhythm of the pack, understood their movements, and found a way to predict their actions. Orin stayed close, his presence steady and reassuring, his hand ready to intervene if needed. Hours passed in a tense standoff. The forest alive with the tension of predator and protector, shadow and light. Lyra could feel the child's heartbeat in rhythm with her own, a reminder of what she was fighting for. And then, as if recognizing strength, the shadow wolves hesitated, their aggression faltering. One by one, they melted back into the trees, leaving only the echo of their presence in the forest. Lyra exhaled slowly, relief mingling with a newfound sense of power. She had faced the test and emerged unbroken. Orin placed a hand gently on her shoulder, a rare touch of softness amidst the trials. "You did well," he said. "Stronger than I could have imagined. The forest has accepted you, Lyra, and so have I." Her heart fluttered at his words. She had expected guidance, protection, and instruction, but not this. Not the unspoken connection, the depth of understanding, the bond forged through trials and danger. She realized then that she had begun to trust him completely, not only as a protector, but as a companion. A partner in a world that had once sought to destroy her. As night fell, the forest seemed to settle, the tension easing into a quiet calm. Lyra sat by the fire, the child in her lap, and watched the flames dance. Orin stood nearby, his eyes scanning the horizon, ever vigilant. The wolf curled beside her, a silent guardian, and Lyra felt the pulse of life around her, the forest, the mountains. Even the winds seemed to hum with energy and promise. "You have changed," Orin said, his voice softer now. "Not just in strength, but in spirit. You have faced fear, betrayal, and shadow, and you have emerged unbroken. That is rare. That is powerful." Lyra looked up at him, a faint smile on her lips. "I did not do it alone," she replied. "You guided me. You taught me. You believed I could." Oran's expression softened, a flicker of something almost tender crossing his face. "We guided each other," he said, "and that makes all the difference." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the firelight casting shadows that danced across their faces. Lyra felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a deep, unspoken connection that went beyond words. She had faced darkness, but now she felt something brighter: hope, trust, and perhaps even the beginning of love. The forest was quiet, but Lyra knew the world beyond the hollow was never truly at peace. Threats would come again, challenges would arise, and the forces that sought to harm her and her child would not rest. Yet she felt ready. She had learned the strength of courage, the power of trust, and the importance of connection. Night deepened, and Orin finally settled beside her, the wolf still vigilant at the edge of the firs. The child stirred, tiny hands reaching outward, and Lyra whispered softly, "You are safe. You will grow strong. You will see the world in ways I never could." Oran's eyes softened as he watched her, a mixture of respect and something deeper, something unspoken. "And you," he said quietly, "will never stand alone again. Not while I breathe. Not while the forest holds us." The wind carried a gentle whisper through the trees, a song of survival, resilience, and renewal. Lyra closed her eyes, letting the sound settle in her heart. She felt the weight of the trials she had faced, but also the light that had emerged from them. She had been abandoned, left to die, yet she had survived. She had been tested, and she had grown. And now, with Orin at her side, she felt a strength that transcended fear and shadow. In the distance, the mountains loomed, silent and eternal. The forest around them whispered ancient secrets, and Lyra knew that the world was vast, full of challenges and wonders alike. But she was ready. She had claimed her place, not just as a survivor, but as a mother, a warrior, and a partner to the man who had saved her. As dawn approached again, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Lyra felt a sense of calm she had never known. The trials of the past weeks had forged her spirit, tempered her courage, and revealed a depth of love and trust she had never imagined possible. She held her child close, feeling the tiny heartbeat in rhythm with her own, and looked to Orin with a sense of quiet gratitude. The wolf at their side stirred, and for a moment, the three of them, a woman, a man, and a child under the watchful eyes of a loyal guardian, stood together. A small force against the vastness of the world. They had survived shadows, betrayal, and fear. They had grown stronger, together. And the forest, eternal and alive, seemed to acknowledge it. Bending shadows and light to honor their courage, Lyra whispered to the child one last time before sleep claimed them. Her voice steady and full of hope. "We are safe now. We have each other, and together we will face whatever comes." Arian's hand rested on her shoulder, a silent promise of protection and partnership. "Whatever comes," he said quietly, "we face it together, always." The forest settled into a gentle rhythm, the wind carrying the scent of pine and snow, the distant howl of wolves like a song of victory and survival. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Lyra understood that she had claimed not only her life, but her destiny. The shadows might return, the mountains might challenge them again, but they were ready. Together, they had emerged from darkness into strength, from fear into trust, and from isolation into the promise of a shared future. And in the quiet of the hollow, with the first light of morning spilling across the snow, Lyra, her child, and Orin stood united an unbroken force. Resilient and ready, their hearts bound by courage, trust, and the quiet, enduring power of love.